like hundreds of people saying it simultaneously. They just got their instructions.
Yeah.
So I mean, essentially, the Dem leadership or political leadership, they issue their instructions, and their puppets carry it out.
Yeah.
And they're just like puppets in a puppet show.
And that's the problem that I see with all this Doge stuff.
Right.
Because everybody should be celebrating that we've found a way to cut out fraud and waste.
Yeah.
If you pay taxes and you don't like that you have to pay so much in taxes, and then you find out that there's significant fraud and waste that's been exposed, you should be celebrating it. This shouldn't be, oh no, the wrong people found this fact and now it's a bad thing.
Yes.
And then there's the propaganda, the mind calling it U.S. aid.
Yeah.
Instead of the United States Agency for International Development. It sounds like it's feeding hungry people.
Right.
People are going to starve, Elon. This is horrible. And then you find out, actually, it's like $250 million for transgender animal studies. Like,
yeah, they're
like
literally mutilating animals.
Yes.
Mutilating animals in demented studies.
Yes.
That are like the worst thing you could possibly imagine from a horror show.
The beagle one. The beagle puppy one.
Horrific.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where they covered their head in a basket and put fleas on their heads to eat them alive. And then they studied these beagles and then killed them. Like, what are you going to learn from that? That's good for anybody.
Yeah. There's some psychotic stuff that happens. So, yeah, I mean, I guess the real threat here is to the bureaucracy. So, like, you probably saw, like, let's say, like, Trump is a threat to our democracy, which is ironic since he was elected with the majority of the, popular vote. They started saying I was a threat to democracy. But if you just replace threat to democracy with threat to bureaucracy, it makes total sense.
Right.
So, I mean, the reality is that our elected officials have very little power relative to the bureaucracy until Doge. So Doge is a threat to the bureaucracy. It's the first threat to the bureaucracy. Normally the bureaucracy eats revolutions for breakfast. This is the first time that they're not, that the revolution might actually succeed, that we can restore power to the people instead of power to the bureaucracy.
The size of it.
Yeah.
Was when you guys first started investigating it, when you first get in, how much of it was shocking? Like just the size of it all.
Well, the size of it all, small decisions result in multi-billion-dollar outcomes. So, we'd see, it was a case where we saw one person was getting $1.9 billion sent to their NGO, which basically got formed about a year ago and had no prior, no prior activity. So they just stand up an NGO. The whole NGO thing is a nightmare, and it's a misnomer, because if you have a government-funded non-governmental organization, you're simply a government-funded organization. It's an oxymoron.
Right. It's a loophole.
Yes. It basically, the government-funded NGOs are a way to do things that would be illegal if they were the government, but are somehow made legal if it's sent to a so-called nonprofit. But these nonprofits are then used to, people cash out these nonprofits. They become very wealthy through nonprofits. They pay themselves enormous sums through these nonprofits.
It's so insane that that's been going on for so long.
It's a gigantic scam. Like one of the biggest, maybe the biggest scam ever.
And how many NGOs?
I think there's the total number of NGOs, probably millions, but in terms of large NGOs, tens of thousands. I mean, it's actually it's kind of a hack to the system where someone can get an NGO stood up for a fairly small amount of money. Like George Soros was really good at this. Like George Soros is like a system hacker. Like he figured out how to hack the system. He's a genius at arbitrage. I mean, these days he's pretty old, but a genius at arbitrage. So he figured out that you could leverage a small amount of money to create a nonprofit, then lobby the politicians to send a ton of money to that nonprofit, so you can take what might be, a $10 million donation to a nonprofit to create a nonprofit and leverage that into a $1 billion NGO. A nonprofit is a weird word. It's just a non-governmental organization, and then the government continues to fund that every year, and it'll have a nice sounding name, like the Institute for or something like that. But really, it's a graft machine.
And what are their
And-
requirements with that money? What do
Well,
they have
it's
to
often
do?
just really no requirements at all.
So they just get grants and the government just assumes that they're doing good work.
I think a lot of people in the government know that they're not doing good work, but it's a giant graft machine. I mean,
But
if
surely
people online are like unpacking this,
Right.
Um,
It almost seems fake. Like when you're seeing how we were covering this article that said 55,000 Democrat NGOs were discovered that had been contributing to campaigns and moving things
Yeah.
around and pushing propaganda, and they were all connected. And they found it through AI. That you have to
Yeah.
go through steps and steps and steps to figure out where the money's coming from.
Mhm.
Oh, it's all funneling down to this
yes,
group, and this
exactly.
group does that. Yeah, it's a giant propaganda machine, a giant regime change machine.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. I mean,
but does it do some good as well?
It does some good. So it's like it's not like 0% good. If it was, if it was really 0% good, it'd be much easier to detect. So there's going to be some percent good that they add in there, but it's like it might be 5% or 10% good, but 95% not.
So is there a way to audit all this stuff and find out, oh, these people are actually just sending food to poor people. These people are actually just helping people with water in third world countries. There's a way to do that and keep funding those?
Yeah, I mean, we have continued to fund things that appear to be legitimate, even with the flimsiest, if there's even the flimsiest excuse. Like, I just say, like, send me a picture of the thing. Like, you could literally have AI generate the picture, but if you're not even willing to try to trick me, then we're, like, not going to send the money, okay?
So what restrictions were put on? There was something set aside, like medicine, and there's what was set aside that there wasn't
there was
gonna be a freeze on?
work for like Ebola prevention. I actually don't know if this work is even effective. It may or may not be. Like it could be the kind of thing where you sort of fund Ebola prevention, but it turns out that actually you're funding a lab that develops new Ebola virus, recipes or something,
Yeah.
and they claim it's Ebola prevention, but it's actually Ebola creation. So some of these things, I don't know. I mean, but it just seems like we shouldn't be sending taxpayer money to dubious enterprises overseas.
Yeah, and why are we doing it? Like, what exactly is the reason? Is it because we want to make friends with these people so the Chinese don't take over, the Russians don't take over? Okay, how much of that is like a good thing? How much of that is smart to do? And how much is a grift? And without any sort of oversight, which has really been going on for so long, they've just had free run.
Yeah. Well, also we just have a real issue with the budget deficit. It's gigantic. So, like if all things being equal, if we didn't have a gigantic budget deficit where interest on the national debt exceeds the Defense Department budget, which is truly astounding. Which means we're paying over $1 trillion of interest on the national debt. Then okay, we would have more room for wasting money, basically. But when we're spending so much money that the country is going bankrupt, then we really need to stop spending money unless we're sure it is good value.
So essentially, we're like a poorly managed business with an unlimited credit line that is off the rails.
Absolutely.
And if you were a person like you are who comes in and takes over businesses and straightens them out, that's exactly what you're doing.
I mean, most of the time I create businesses from scratch. Like,
right.
Twitter was a case where, I kind of bought a company that was, I kind of knew it was a hairball.
Well, you came in at Tesla in the beginning, but they were already doing something, right?
No, Tesla did not exist in any meaningful form. There were no employees. JV Straubel and I joined 3 other people. There was no car, there was no nothing. It
wasn't even a prototype yet?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a prototype already.
No, there weren't even any employees.
Oh, wasn't it that's a funny narrative that people like to say, that you didn't even create Tesla then.
Yeah, that's wrong.
So if you're handling the government like a business, you're going to have to go through all of these departments and do the exact same thing that you're doing with USAID. So how does that scale up? Like, how many people do you need to do something like that?
Well, we started off with about 40 people, maybe 100 people. And we're really just going through doing very basic things here. It's as bad as Twitter was, the federal government is much worse. So, in the case of Twitter, it wasn't a profitable company.